Morning, entrepreneurs. So today I want to talk to you about being lonely. So this is a feeling I am all too familiar with. I want to talk to you a little bit about my loneliness as a Christian, and then a little bit as my loneliness as an entrepreneur. And then I want to tell you what God did for me. So I'm hoping that this will give you some inspiration and help you to realize that you don't have to be alone. As a Christian or as a business owner, you don't have to be alone. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my past. So I found God in 1998. I was a sophomore in high school, and I had a friend who introduced me to God. And long story short, I was very analytical. I had gone through a lot of emotional problems with family, death, and things. And I was very uninterested in God. And so while she was a wonderful friend and I loved her to death, she couldn't answer my questions that were more logical in nature. So long story short, I came to know God in 1998. I'm sure I'll talk about that more later. But the point of this is that I ended up going into Master's Commission, which is a ministry program. And then after Master's Commission, I stayed on at the church to be a youth leader. And I constantly prayed for God to send someone to me who could walk the path with me, but there was no one. I was surrounded by Christians who were sinning, and after being a youth leader for a couple of years, it was determined that pretty much everyone in youth leadership was either dealing with pornography or drunkenness. They were going out and getting drunk on Saturday evening and then coming to church still hungover or drunk. So the church leadership understandably decided to take everyone out of the youth leadership, including me, and I was literally the only person who wasn't doing any of those things. And the youth leadership was one of the things that sort of kept me afloat, kept me going to the church, was because it was so obvious that God was putting people in my path who I could help. Having dealt with suicidal tendencies myself, those people seemed to just come out of the woodwork, and I was able to show them that they didn't have to live like that there was more, give them hope. And the number of late night calls that I received for kids that were about to end their lives is unbelievable. So there was no doubt that's where I was supposed to be. And even though I was alone because I didn't have anyone else that was walking with me, it felt like everybody was following me. And as a Christian in general, that can be difficult, but as a new Christian, it's even more overwhelming because you're learning as you go. And anyways, so I was alone. I felt alone. I remember praying and praying and praying for God to send someone to me that could walk the path with me. And everybody that would come into my life would be someone that needed me to help them to understand God. And so I went, after I was taken up youth leadership, I went to the main service for, I don't know, maybe a year. But it was really difficult for me because I didn't feel like I was plugged in anywhere. I didn't relate to any of the people. And on top of that, I've always been a very connected person since I found God. And I was always the first one to know when God was moving. You know, the pastor would say that God is doing this or that, and I would have already known. So when I started having church attendees and church leadership coming up to me and saying, "Your praise and worship so inspired us. It's beautiful. It's so nice to see someone with your enthusiasm for God." I know that they meant it as a compliment, but how it came out to me was everybody was still watching me. Nobody was still with me. Even though I wasn't in a position of leadership, I was still somehow leading, and I just couldn't cope. I couldn't deal with it. I had so much going on in my own life that I needed someone to be there for me, and God was, but there's a difference between having a flesh and blood person and God. And so I left the church. And for years, I just studied on my own, and I did my own thing, and I would have some Christian friends, and I would have non-Christian friends, and I would have heated debates about whether or not it was logical to believe in God, and talk with people and tell them about my experience. And it was beautiful but sad because the entire time I was alone. I felt alone. So fast forward, I have a husband and a daughter, and although I still have a very strong faith in God and I know He's there and we talk, I haven't been putting aside time for Him. And I've just continued to feel alone all those years since 1998. So I'm going to tell you what happened, but first I want to draw some parallels between this and being a business owner. And those parallels are, number one, you feel like, I think most business owners feel like they're creating it as they go. So you're trying to figure it out, and you've got people that are watching you, your customers, the whole time. And so when you mess up, or when you feel like you don't know the answer, what are you supposed to do? You just kind of don't know. And so you're creating it as you go. And that's how I felt in my Christian walk, that I was the one that was having to try and figure out what to do, and there was no one to guide me, just like in my business. And don't get me wrong, I've been a member of some amazing business boards where everybody talks and asks for help and there's people there, but it's more a group setting. You're not making one-on-one connections, and there's a difference between that. So you feel like you're alone, you're running your own business, you're trying to figure out all the steps, and no one tells you which steps to go in what order, because it's really hard. Every business can be different, and so you're just alone. And in business, inevitably, you have friends and family who say they support you but don't, and then there's those who blatantly don't support you, and so you're even more alone. And when you become a Christian, it's the same thing. There are friends and family who look at you and say, what happened to you? You used to be this awesome person, and now you're like crazy. So both of those things, I think, have a tendency to make people feel alone. So when you're doing both of them, it is really hard to not feel disconnected, to not feel like everything is on your shoulders. So what happened to me after all these years is I found a group of women who are not only Christians, they're also business owners. And they are motivated and driven to move mountains and have faith as small as a mustard seed that God will build their business. And I'm going to cry, I'm sorry. So I finally have people, and I don't even know these people. They're online. I've never met them in person. But God has finally, after all of these years, brought some people into my life who understand. So, sorry. God called me to be honest, so that's what I'm trying to do. So for those of you out there who understand, either you're a Christian who feels alone or you're a business owner who feels alone, you don't have to be alone. It doesn't have to take you, geez, how many years is that? It doesn't have to take you, what is that, 20 years? See, it's 2018, 1998, so yeah, 20 years. It doesn't have to take you 20 years of being alone before you find someone. You need to wait on God. That is true, and there is something to that, and I wouldn't trade these women for anything. And I wouldn't be the person I am if I hadn't walked my own walk for all those years by myself. But you also don't have to just assume God is going to throw someone in your path. There are tools, there are plenty of business groups that would love to have you come and talk with them. There are other women that are looking for someone to talk to. You don't have to meet them online, or you don't have to meet them in person. You don't have to meet them online. They're everywhere. You just have to determine for yourself that you refuse to wait 20 years. That is not going to be what happens to you. And the amazing thing about God is that oftentimes He does what we ask. Sometimes it might even be a little bit ill-advised, but He'll take whatever it is that you do and He will make it grow, and He will redirect you to the right path if you're listening. So take a step out in faith. Believe that there is someone there that He wants you to connect with. I can't even imagine over these 20 years if I had made more of an effort, instead of just sitting there and praying for God to give me someone, if I had gone out of my way to make it happen for myself, what could have happened? What wonderful people I could have met over the years. So yes, there is a time to wait for God to tell you, but there is also a time to move forward in action and do what you need, what God is telling you need. All those years, God told me I needed somebody. I knew I needed somebody, and I just didn't get it. So all those years were wasted. I could have been doing other things. Don't get me wrong, I don't regret my past, because as I said, I wouldn't be who I am if I hadn't have gone through it. But that doesn't mean you have to. That doesn't mean you have to spend your time being alone. So my prayer for you today is that you would take a step out in faith that God will direct your steps, that you are not excluding Him from the conversation, but that you are trusting that He knows what you need and where you need to go. And even more than that, you need to have faith that if you royally mess up, let's just say somehow you manage to not find the right people, God is strong enough to take you out of that. So my encouragement for you today is to step out in faith. Take a step out, trust and believe that He is guiding your steps, and you will get to where you need to go. Don't let it take 20 years for you. So I want to thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Angie, thank you for your encouragement. But before we go, I really want to pray for you. This has really been on my heart today. And I think that God must have this message for someone. So God, I just thank you for these wonderful women, these business owners that have been struggling with, maybe now they feel alone, or maybe this is something that speaks to something that happened to them in the past. I just know that you will get this message to whoever needs it. And I thank you for giving me the strength to be honest and stop worrying about what I look like and what people will think. And I pray that you just give me the strength to continue to do that, and that you would bring people to me that need my own special brand of crazy, that maybe don't have other Christian business owners that can relate to them. I just pray that you would bring us all together and help us to find each other. In your name we pray, amen. Have a great day, guys. Bye.